Hi, welcome to this episode of Faith and Family First. I'm Jim Hochberg, be here with Eva Andrade. Today we have special guests, Peter and Lynn Finnegan, and we're going to talk about some things that you're going to want to know about getting medication for your family members in the hospital and how sometimes it doesn't go well, and some stuff in the legislature to try and fix it. Anyway, stay tuned because we'll be right back. So hi, Eva.
Jim, it's so good to see you. And you know what I like about the show today is I don't have to just look at you. I actually have other people I can actually look at this time. So thank you. And this actually, for our viewers, we're going to do something exciting today. It's the girls against the guys.
And I usually keep my eyes shut when I'm on the show with you by myself. So that's okay.
Well, I think what we should do first, because we have a lot to talk about today in a very short amount of time, is to let our guests introduce themselves. And for those of you that have been around Hawaii politics, you're going to notice that I'm sitting next to Lynn Finnegan. She is no stranger to politics.
Yes, I'm Lynn Finnegan. I used to be the minority leader in the State House of Representatives. And my husband, Peter.
Hi, I'm Peter Finnegan. Yep, husband and a retired HFD fire captain.
Thanks for your service.
And we're here to talk about the right to try medication. Why don't you tell us about Auntie Mickey?
Yeah, Auntie Mickey was a very close auntie. We grew up in three houses next to one another, so I spent my childhood growing up around her. Unfortunately, in September, we got called that she had been went to the emergency room with COVID at Straub Hospital. And so we quickly kind of tried to find out what was happening and was concerned, obviously, because with COVID. And next day I was on a Zoom call, and the family really was concerned that they didn't want her put on a ventilator. And she was already requesting ivermectin, which has been shown to really help those that have COVID. And they had been denying her requests. But that next morning, on that Zoom call, I got to hear her ask for the ivermectin, but also refuse the ventilator. But what was really tough was that the doctor just kept bombarding her with questions about her end of life. They basically wanted her and was trying to convince her to sign a do not resuscitate order. And they really described CPR in a very graphically horrifying way. And as a fire captain, I've done CPR many, many times. And yes, it isn't pleasant. But when someone is kind of facing that tough decision, it's pretty tough to realize that you're what seems like minutes away from having to make that decision because they wanted her on that ventilator.
Can you tell us what they said about CPR? What did they say?
Sure. They basically described it as, you're going to crack your ribs, you're going to puncture your lungs, you're likely going to end up a vegetable, and in the most worst ways possible. That would make anybody say, well, I don't want that.
Well, in your experience, have you ever punctured anybody's lung doing CPR?
I don't think I've ever punctured anybody's lungs.
I've never heard of that.
Well, I think it can happen. My brother passed away from colon cancer about 10 years ago. He was young. And because of all the chemotherapy he was on, he had a DNR. And they were explaining to him, well, he actually didn't have one to begin with. And they told him that because of all the experience that he had with all the medication he was taking, that his bones would be very brittle. Mm-hmm. And he actually had lost a lot of weight, and he looked pretty bad. And so what they told us then is there are cases like that where that act.
So maybe the bones get more brittle or something.
They can. And I don't know if you've ever had a broken rib before. My mother did. It's a very painful experience. So did she feel like then that there was kind of like pressure to make that decision?
Yeah, there were, and she was starting to cry, in that moment, just the weight of all of these decisions. And so it was pretty emotional. We were able to pray, during that call. Which I was really thankful for. And we actually ended the call, the Zoom video, with her, and her two sons were on it as well, kind of hopeful and thought it was a good call. But then less than an hour later, we got contacted by the hospital that she had been put on the ventilator, even though she had said, no, I don't want to be put on the ventilator. And so that kind of just scrambled, and to not take up too much time, she ended up on the ventilator for the next about 52 days until she passed away, and we never got a chance to talk to her again. And we began really an effort to try to get her ivermectin, just really in the hopes, because the hospital, as the days progressed, and she continued to get worse with everything the hospital was trying to do to help, it just wasn't turning things around. And so we started exploring other options, trying to find out what might help again. And I guess we already knew about ivermectin and found that there were ways to give ivermectin to somebody who was on a ventilator, but the hospital just kept refusing. So we did seek out a lawyer. We had found a lawyer that was in New York that had successfully gotten hospitals to administer ivermectin over 20 times at that point last year, and the people recovered. They got off the ventilator, they went home to their families, and that's what we wanted.
And this is with the doctors in the hospital saying that these patients have a 5, 10, 15% chance of living. And we knew that was similar. That Auntie's case was a similar situation where they were saying, your aunt is likely not going to live. She has a 5, 10, 15% chance. So all of these videos that we were watching from professional, medical institutions and doctors that were showing the success, that they were repurposing drugs that were pennies on the dollar in cost, and different protocols and saving lives. And we see across the nation how many, if we improve that death rate by 50%, how many lives is that? That's a huge amount of lives. And so that's the kind of thing that we were just sitting there feeling hopeless and helpless.
Why was the hospital refusing to let your auntie have the medication that she wanted?
Well, obviously, there's been a lot of negative press, I guess, against ivermectin in particular. But we did find out through the court case that did go to a hearing that the administration had felt a lot of pressure from their own doctors. A lot of families had been requesting this same medication that we were. And the doctors weren't really clear. Are we allowed to give it? Are we not allowed to give it? And prior to, I guess, that pressure from the doctors, it was up to the doctor. The doctor could give it. Well, Straub felt then the need to protect, their doctors to come out with a prohibition. And so they actually came up, which they hadn't done prior, and the prohibition was then prevented any doctor from administering it, which was really tragic. During the case, though, we did find out that they really hadn't researched any, on ivermectin when they made these decisions, that it was kind of a knee-jerk reaction, and that they were following, the FDA and others, which also hadn't done any research on it themselves. They were, for whatever reasons, they weren't allowing it.
How long did the process take from the day you had the Zoom call that your Aunt Mickey was put on the ventilator, while you're trying to get the hospital to allow her to have ivermectin? How many days or weeks did that go on before maybe it got to the point where it was too late for ivermectin? I don't know.
Well, it was less than a day to get on the ventilator, which made it tough, because it would have been much easier to give her ivermectin just orally herself with some water. So it was less than a day that option wasn't available. And then each weekend, we'd fight during the week trying to contact lawyers and other doctors, because we wanted the ivermectin prescribed, and to get a doctor to prescribe her the ivermectin, that was a tough process, contacting these various doctors until we finally did it. But each weekend that went by, we weren't sure if she was going to survive the weekend. So it was just heartbreaking. We try our best to operate Monday through Friday within the court system and the doctor's office hours and various things. And then each weekend, it was like our hands were tied. And we were just hoping she'd make it to Monday, and then we could try, continue to try things.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's really striking me about this, and I really want our viewers to think about this, you've got someone in the hospital, they've been told by the doctors that there's a big chance that they're not going to make it. Remember that in COVID, they're locked in hospitals, their families are not allowed in to see them. So I want you to picture for a moment your auntie lying there, having all of these thoughts and decisions she has to make with the fear of what's coming down the road. And she's alone. And I think that that's a conversation we have to have on not just this issue, but many others, that there are very hard decisions that have to be made when people are reaching the end of their life. But I want to go back to what you were talking about. This is a difficult situation for your family, and I'm so sorry that you had to experience this. What was the hardest thing? I mean, we know that the process itself is very difficult, but what was the hardest thing you had to experience through this?
Probably the hardest thing was just almost the daily phone calls from the doctors trying to pressure us to take her off life support. We were holding out hope. We still had heard stories of others that had received the treatment this many days into it, and some as many as 50 days on a ventilator and still going home to their families. So we weren't giving out hope. Our hope was resting in trying to get this treatment, even though there was no guarantee. But every day, my cousins would call crying, and just saying, man, they're just putting pressure and making us feel like we're terrible people for trying to keep them alive. And it wasn't just one doctor, it was multiple doctors constantly trying to say, you guys are being cruel, you guys are prolonging her agony, you guys are, let her go and things. And we just pleaded with them, let us try everything that we know about.
And they wouldn't let the ivermectin try.
Right.
Wow.
I was like, if you just let us try it, and if it doesn't work, then we can let her go, at least with a good heart, knowing that, okay, we knew everything that we knew of was given a chance.
In the last couple of minutes on this part of our discussion today, so she passed away just before Thanksgiving last year. What was Thanksgiving and Christmas time like for you and your family?
It really wasn't a Thanksgiving in the normal sense. Obviously, COVID already makes it really discouraging to gather with family. But yes, right after that happened, our hearts really weren't in, a celebrative mood. And the family did have the services in December, but then that kind of coincided closer to Christmas as well. So it did put a damper on Christmas. As believers in Christ, though, we did feel a really solid conviction. My auntie was a strong believer, very active in the church. I mean, I had no doubt that she's saved and her eternity, is secured. But it's still, she was active. Prior to this, she would go on trips to see her grandkids, and they'd go on activities and visit national parks. And when I had to go through her home and gather paperwork and look for her living trust and look for her healthcare directives, I could just see all the other activities that were in her that I didn't even know she did, being in her room and going through her items. And so it was just tragic to have her life, cut short. I'm thankful she's with the Lord.
What would her message be right now?
Obviously, it would be one of salvation, for sure. She was a fervent prayer warrior, really, and she always, would lead that. And so I know her message would be to put your trust in God and, and your eternal hope in the Lord. But I think she also would just want to exhibit love for her family, and such a caring person. So I think, that's good words to live by and for us to treat one another with.
And now, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say two things, because you said, what was the hardest part? And then, basically, what did we learn from this situation? And the hardest part for me was there were barriers in every direction, every day, every hour. It was like, we want to hire this lawyer. We can't hire this lawyer because we've got to do this. We want to get medication. We can't do this. It was just barrier after barrier. And it was so difficult to know. And Peter's cousin, the son of Auntie, would say, I don't understand this. You can sign a waiver and jump out of an airplane, but you can't sign a waiver and take a few pills, And so we don't know how to explain that, right. and it was just barrier after barrier. And I would say that the lesson that we learned through all of this is we have to do something. We have to do something to change this. We should not be handcuffed in making our own decisions. And these are proven safe decisions and medications that you can take with the highest safety profile. It's not an ignorant person looking and saying, this is ivermectin being given, horse doses given to humans. These are used on children across the world, and we can't get it for people. who are suffering from something that they might die from.
Well, I think this is a great segue to go into the second part of the show that we wanted to talk about, because back even before COVID-19. So let's move past COVID-19. Let's go back to 2016 here in the state of Hawaii. And I want to throw out some names for you peeps in Hawaii. I want to throw out Senator Espero, Senator Green, Senator Baker, Senator Kidani, Senator Shimabukuro introduced a bill that would have allowed right to try right here in the state of Hawaii. And it wasn't the first state. It had already happened in some other states. So this wasn't something that was a Republican or a Democrat thing. This was a thing that was allowing people to make medical decisions if they were in these situations, right? And the bill passed unanimously in the House and in the Senate, although 5 senators were excused in that final vote. I will not give you their names, but send me an email if you want to know who those 5 senators were. But it was unanimous. It got all the way up to our governor, who vetoed it. So
That's right.
I would love to get your guys' thoughts on all of this.
Take it away.
Yeah, this is what we did was we introduced the bill. We took the same bill, not a perfect bill, but
You
we
mean
took
this year you introduced the bill?
This year.
Right.
Because we looked at it, unanimous, right? Support, getting vetoed by the governor. So what we said was, I have this background in politics and introducing bills, and I said, why don't you just take the same bill that went all the way to the governor? Let's reintroduce it. And so the Republican caucus did it. And so we wanted to get it heard. We knocked on the doors of a couple of the House representatives on the Health Committee. I don't think it's going to be heard, but that's not the end for us. Our ideas in moving forward was that we want to protect people's lives. We want to make sure that whether or not there's legislation that gets passed this year, that this issue become known, because it's not only about COVID patients. You're exactly right. This is about anybody with cancer or any other kind of illness and disease that they can benefit from, medication that may not be approved by FDA right now. But can be very useful in saving a person's life.
We're throwing this out to you, listeners and viewers, because we want you to understand that this is not about COVID. This is not about us, although this was a driving situation for you, but to show that this was a bipartisan thing back in 2016. Well,
and let's look at why Governor Ige vetoed it.
What was his reason behind it?
Because when the governor vetoes a bill, he has to send a message back to the legislature with his veto reasoning. And what he said is that this was in 2016, there was a bill that Congress had passed that allowed you to try experimental things. It wasn't the right to try bill that President Trump later passed in 2018. And what Governor Ige said is the federal version did not yet have final regulations that the agency would need to make, but that the purpose of those regs was going to be to protect the consumers. And so it was better to use the federal side than the bill that we passed here. And his main theme was consumer protection, which strikes me as really off the wall when you think about what kind of consumer protection did your family get from his veto?
Right.
None. It's a big Easter egg.
0.
Yeah.
So how many right to life? Oh, that'd be great if we had some right to life laws here. These right to try bills. How many are across the nation right now?
So 41 have passed and have been approved across the country.
Are
41 states.
So are we saying there's some blue states in there? I just want to show that, right?
Exactly.
This is not a partisan issue.
This is not a partisan issue.
And how many are working on it?
I don't have the answer to that because we tried to research it, and I don't know about the leftover states.
But we know that at least one is.
I would wager they all are.
Yes.
Actually,
because of the situation.
And the reason is the federal law that was passed under President Trump that he signed into law, I think May 30th, 2018 or something, it's not all inclusive. It would not have covered Auntie Mickey's situation because it requires that the medicine you want to try not be permissible for any purpose. And since ivermectin has long been permissible for other purposes in humans, it wouldn't have fallen under that bill anyway. So the states do have work to do, and Hawaii needs to go back to 2016. Remember what they did and take care of business. The bill here, though, has 3 referrals, 3 committees it has to go through. And in my experience, and tell me if I'm wrong, because I never had a seat in the legislature, giving a bill 3 referrals is kind of a way of saying it ain't going through.
It's difficult, very difficult.
It used to be that way, but I will say that the past couple of years, when something is being pushed, it could be a quadruple referral and it'll pass. So
they do. They have joint committees to speed it up and all that kind of stuff.
But I've also seen some problematic bills with 4 single referrals, or you know what I mean, each going to, and they pass. It depends on the push behind it. Now, what's sad about this is a very good issue, and what some people would say here in the state, and I'd love to get now full transparency. Lynn is the chair of the Republican Party here in Hawaii, so we're not trying to be any sneaky in here. There were the introducers of this bill are all Republicans.
Yes.
Now, why is that? Why, with all the Dems that supported it back in 2016, why do you feel? Because you have a little bit of mana'o here. What is your thoughts behind why the Dems didn't get behind this bill?
Well, it's not that they didn't sign on it. What had happened was when we had this idea, it was pretty last minute. It was, we were reeling from Auntie's death and we wanted to do something. So I found out about this. I thought, well, there's no way that, this is going to pass. Then I found out that it had been introduced back in 2016 and it went all the way to the governor's office, gave me a little hope. So I said, well, okay, let's do that. And because I'm the Republican Party chair, I asked for help with people that I knew.
Now, why not? We have 4 members in the House. Why is one name missing?
I think it was a matter of time. Okay. I think it was just a matter of time. It wasn't. It wasn't a purposeful. I'm not going to sign on the bill.
Okay.
And you just gave me an idea. I'm a little rusty regarding the process, but I think if we do band together, it does still need to go through the 3 readings on both the House and the Senate. And so I think that we could actually try to make a push to do a joint hearing, of the first and second hearings of the bill, and maybe give this some life, give the bill some life and have more discussion about it. Like Peter said, we are not going to give up on this issue because we look at kids that have life-threatening or illnesses or diseases and adults and elderly. We need something like this. It's responsible, like you said. It's about what about us consumers who want to consume this education and these medications to save lives? It doesn't make any sense to me. I think it's common sense that we look at this in a way that protects people but also gives them a chance to live. It's not a hard decision. It's politics in a lot of ways is all I can say.
It has to be politics because depending on what your politics are, it's my body. You can't tell me I can't do with it what I want, right?
Right.
So it is politics.
Yeah, and as far as process goes, at any time they could re-refer the bill to one committee. I mean,
it's House Bill 1918.
It's House Bill 1918.
Which is very easy to remember. Sometimes I don't remember and it drives me nuts. I have to keep looking it up. But 1918 is the First World War, Woodrow Wilson days. Income tax came from him. You'll remember. 1918. That's why you pay income tax.
That's right.
There you go.
So, we just have a few minutes left, but there is something I kind of want to touch on something you said before we started filming. So I want to throw this over to Peter because, he's been kind of quiet. So the process that you experienced with your auntie, you had mentioned that, when somebody is going through this experience at the end of their life, there's a lot of decisions that have to be made, right? What advice would you give to people before they get to that moment where they have to make these decisions?
Well, first would be about if there is something that you're dealing with long term and you have some time, then you do want to kind of research your treatments to know it so that you're equipped. When you talk to your doctors, you can advocate for your family members. You won't just take anything they say as the only information. But also, I did learn that more so the importance of the Advanced Healthcare Directive. It did become very important in terms of who my auntie had designated, to be able to make the decisions for her after she became sedated and put on a ventilator. And for almost 2 months, then that's the person that's really making those choices. We did find an Advanced Healthcare Directive, a couple of weeks after she had been put under sedation. And she had some really good descriptions in there of kind of quality of life and things that were important to her to kind of help make that decision about whether extending or not extending. But I just want to encourage other families to have those discussions ahead of time, to let your family's members know where you keep, advanced healthcare directive. It was hard to find it, and so when the time comes, and just prepare those things ahead of time. I think it would just take a lot of emotional turmoil, off of families. If you don't have one, hospitals do have a surrogate decision maker form that they can verbally state, while they're still conscience, and the hospitals will kind of allow that so that the other family members can make decisions. So there's another option there if you didn't get around, to the advanced healthcare.
But there's actually a lot of complicated things that go into deciding who it is you want to put on your directive. And that's something that really needs to be thought through. Yeah. It might be your favorite niece because you like and trust her. But maybe your favorite niece isn't equipped to make those hard decisions. So you really need to get the right person.
And Hawai'i Family Forum has done training on this very issue in the churches. So if you're watching this right now and you think this would be a good conversation to have, and we deal with the issues that he's talking about with family members, because you've got to have all these discussions long before an emergency happens. I don't think as a first responder, I don't think that you're waiting until you're in that automobile accident to decide that your car needs to be safety checked or, all these kind of things. You want to make sure that you're doing the right things. Conversations with the family here in Hawaii, very important, because the way that our laws are written here, as Jim mentioned, there's some tricky stuff in there. So we want to make sure that you're well equipped.
So while you're watching the show, if you think maybe your church would like to host Eva and I to do that presentation, make a comment on the show and she'll see it. And we haven't done it actually in quite a number of years.
It's been a while. So, Jim,
yes,
I think we're running out of time, but is there any final words of advice you have for our listeners and viewers?
I just want to thank you for the opportunity. Our Auntie Mickey was very loved. We hope that her death won't be for a senseless reason and that this could help other families. So we're going to continue to advocate for her and advocate for something that can make it better for Hawaii's families.
And I just want to reiterate or maybe just add to the discussion that there are doctors out there, there are pharmacists out there who are willing to take chances and who are willing to read and do the right thing and look at the scientific evidence. And they're being threatened. They're really the heroes, and they're being threatened with their license being taken away and all that other kind of stuff. It's really not just an injustice for the patient, but it's an injustice for these doctors too. And I just get so riled up and emotional about it because, again, it goes back to people are dying unnecessarily and families are suffering. And, I watched Peter and his, these are men that are trying to hold, things together for their families and they're barely being able to speak about it because it's so hard. So hard on them. So I just encourage people to just remember that these are people's lives. Don't take, just what's in the media out there and believe it to be true. Do your homework. There are doctors and pharmacists out there that believe that there are other ways to save lives.
So I'd say call your legislator and ask them if they even know about HB 1918 this year.
Yeah.
Maybe they haven't seen it. Maybe they don't know about it.
And if this year passes and nothing's done on it, there's still next year. We're not going to throw in the towel and give up. So in honor of Auntie Mickey, this show's for her. But for all of you watching that may have lost someone during the past pandemic, our hearts and prayers go out to you too. So we send all of our love and blessing to you. We will see you next week. Mahalo, everybody. Thanks for joining.
You're welcome.